G'day and welcome. Okay, I got a barbecued dog over there. That's why she's in the shade now. And I got a hot motorcycle here. Not hot as stolen, but hot as sitting in the sun. And it's actually very warm today. We're finally starting to get spring weather. And the May flowers, they're still not out yet. Like everything's like a month behind. It's a little on the cool side. But today was a good day. The road was nice and warm and nice and hot. But when I started out, it was a bit cloudy, and this bike is kind of funny. Now I'm running 10W50 or 20W50 oil in here, which it recommends 15W50, but you just can't get 15W50 anywhere around here. It's 10W40, 15W20. So I got 15W20. It is motorcycle oil, so formulated for bikes or whatever. So whatever BS little selling point, it's all the same crap at the end of the day. But you know, if they could charge a few more bucks for it, they'll put a fancy label on it, right? But anyway, my starting problems that I have usually occur at like 15 Celsius and below. But sometimes the very first startup of the day, it's finicky. Now these Triumph TT600s, they didn't make them for very many years. I think they built 99 to 2002. Like this would be the finished year. And they had fuel mapping problems. The first one is at 4,500 RPM, it sounds like you're strangling a billy goat. It's the most horrid sound you'll ever. Even though I have a beautiful sounding exhaust on there, it's just that weird kind of like Heimlich maneuver, kind of gag, like I say, gagging billy goat sound. I can't describe it as anything else. I've never heard a gagging billy goat, but if I did, I know what it would sound like, and it would sound like that. But it just does that at 4,500 RPM. I don't know why. It has something to do with the way it's they put it together. So a lot of people were complaining about the fuel mapping in the beginning. Now this bike I don't think has these. Got a puking dog over there. Don't has a standard fuel mapping on it. Why? Because well, they put on the aftermarket. This is a Triumph exhaust. I don't know what the model of it's called, but it is a Triumph upgrade exhaust. It's a beautiful sounding can on there. It's a bit drony sometimes, but for the most part, it's not too bad. You know, it's not obscenely loud. I don't like obscenely loud bikes. I spend too much time on them to want to be deaf like that. You know, like obscenely loud bikes are okay for about 15, 20 minutes. But if you're on there an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours of riding, trust me, that I wear earplugs when I ride. I highly recommend you do that. Because, yeah, you can get a lot of, just the wind noise can give you a lot of hearing damage. But anyway, the mapping. Let's get to it. This bike was probably remapped, and my hunch is it probably has the Tune ECU 10166 mapping, or the 10. You know, talk about a little bit of irony here, but a British bike with a remove one number and you got 1066. But the fuel mapping is 10166. And if you look at the starting process, what the bike is supposed to do, and my bike seems to do it, this is why I have the hunch that it's in there. Now, when this bike is running, it is smooth from the bottom to the top. Yeah, I got to do a chain adjustment and stuff like that because I'm starting to get a little bit of vibration from back there, but it just, you know, it's still pretty good. I got to get the young lad that has the back stand so I could do that. But this bike, from the throttle from the bottom to the top, is very smooth, especially once the bike is warmed up. Now, when you first start the bike is should jump to, if you look at the Tune ECU mapping, on cold startup, you should be hovering somewhere around 1,750 RPM, give or take, or 1,800. It's where they set it, but it's going to vary a bit, right? Then once it gets a little bit warmer, it's going to pop up to about 2,000 RPM. It's going to run very smooth at 2,000 RPM. Then once you get up to 41 Celsius, you're ready to go, according to the manual, that the bike's considered warmed up. And you won't see any temperature rating on the screen until you hit 41 Celsius or 40 Celsius or whatever, letting you know that the bike is, you know, ready to go. Now, once you get up to, say, I think 54 or something, you'll have to look at the map. I might get some of the temperatures wrong. The temperatures, the bike's going to drop down to about 1,500 RPM. And then at about 64 Celsius, it drops down to about 1350, and it stays there for whatever. Now, why they've got it idling at 1350, I have no idea. I don't know if it actually, but the bike sounds a little bit like it's about to stall and die on you. I've only had this bike stall and die by just letting the throttle idle without touching it. I've had that happen once out of, again, if you add up last year, 106 rides last year and 19 rides this year. But the other thing is that sometimes the bike is really tough to start, and you have to hold the throttle on just to keep it for about the first minute or two, just to keep it running. And while you're doing that, the ECU is actually fighting with you because for whatever reason, on my particular bike, and this is probably what's happening to other people's bikes, is that it just seems like the ECU isn't awake or something. I don't know exactly what the problem is. My first hunch was the IACV valve tubes, the vacuum tubes on there. The little boots on those tend to crack, and so I was going to do it yesterday, but I didn't get around to it. I'm going to do a mission tomorrow, and then maybe Wednesday I'm going to pull the tank off of it, have a look, see if there's any cracks, and if that's what's messing around with my starting. So if that's what you're getting, that's what it is. But if your idle is all over the place while it's warming up and stuff like that, that is kind of normal. What it also does when you first hit the way it's supposed to work, you think of it like an electronic choke. Okay, so on the startup, okay, you don't touch anything. You don't touch the throttle at all. You hit it. The thing should pop up to about 3,000 RPM. You'll hear woo, and then it'll come down to what it needs to come down to. And then it goes, blah, 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 blah. It does that sound there. It's kind of a cool pulsing sound. And it takes a little while for it to find the stroke and everything like that, where it runs smooth. But once it's running it, you're fine. But that's it's just some people might be remapping and not understanding what's going on, so they think there's something wrong with their idle. But it's just the way they set it. Why did they set it at those numbers? I have no idea. Maybe if you leave it idling at 2,000, especially if you're in stop and go traffic, maybe at 1350, it compensates for the extra heat that you'll get in the stop and go traffic because you spend a lot more time idling. This bike does not like traffic; it gets hot very fast. It's a full fairing, and you got to think about all the heat that's in there. So that's what's going on there. Now, when you're running, if I've got because I do have the program. I haven't done it yet. I'm only going to do that as a last ditch resort. I still got to buy the OBD2 reader cable for the laptop. So I don't want to touch that if I don't have to. But if you got a bike that's running really rough, before you even remap it, I would check first off your plugs. Okay, now plugs for this are anywhere between $11 to $18 Canadian, depending on where you shop for them. So if you don't need them right away, hunt around. Maybe you find a deal for like $4 or $5, and then away you go. Stock up on them. The other thing is that with this bike, okay, it might not necessarily be the ECU that's messing up on you. It could be those vacuum tubes, which you can't even see them. So it's a little motor that sits in there, and there's 4 vacuum tubes on it for the starting. And all it is basically a solenoid. That thing could be the IAC, basically intake air control valve, could be just dirty and not functioning properly, and maybe it works when it warms up. It could be weak plugs. It could be, you got to do process of elimination. So it could be those little vacuum tubes, the little boots on them. They crack, and that seems to be where most of the people that I've seen have the problems. They go get a retune because they think it's just the mapping is screwed on it. But they get it home and it's still doing the same thing, and they can't figure out why it runs like a little bit better because the mapping is kind of sort of figured some of it out. But it can never, if there's a extra leak of air coming in on these vacuum hoses, it can never regulate for that. So that's why it's going to be wonky and stuff. So that's what I think is happening with my bike. So what are the fixes? Well, obviously replace the vacuum hoses if that's what it needs. But when I take it apart, I'll show you. But it's just, I've seen a guy, he has a beautiful canary yellow one. Not the bumblebee one with the black and the yellow, but a full canary yellow TT600. And beautiful bike, sir. But he seems that he's having problems with it. He done the 10166 map. I keep saying, want to say 1066. All my British brothers and sisters will understand when I say 1066. You know, I am a Commonwealth, so I do know a bit about it. But the thing too is I don't know what exhaust he has on there. I've got the stock pipe. I want to put it on one day just to see what happens. You know, how much quieter it is. But I don't know, I really like that pipe, I really do. It's kind of pretty. It's dirty right now. You'd think somebody would own a bike like this would actually clean it. Yeah. But what that tells you, and I mean, look at all my fly collection. Yeah. But it tells you one thing, at least you know I'm riding it. So I will be cleaning this bike and getting it all spit and shine pretty soon. But yeah, I got a mission to do tomorrow. I want to do that mission. Then Wednesday, okay, if I have to sit out a day and not ride, okay, I'll take the tank off. I just want to look at those vacuum tubes or vacuum hoses and the little fittings to the vacuum hoses. And if that's it, I'm just going to try the simple stuff first, the cheap man's method, maybe just tape them up, see if it stops the leak. But other than that, this bike starts fine on the restart once it's been warmed up. But it's that cold start in the morning. So what I do is I come out, I don't even put on my gear, I just come out, I start it, I let it warm up to about 60, 65 Celsius or 64 Celsius. Then I shut the bike off and it seems like it's fine for the rest of the day. But on cold startup, that's where I'm having my problem now. If you're having it all the time, it's probably because you got a major crack on those tubes. So I know there's a lot of people hunting for solutions why they're Triumph Daytonas have funky idles from time to time, and you can't figure it out. And I've been doing a lot of research on it for about a year now, so these are the typical things that keep coming up as the common problem, and that seems to be the top of the list, is those idle control air valves. So you're fine once you're running. Now, I don't know how that motor works. Somebody a little more mechanical savvy than me probably. My hunch is that it's only used during the start. That's why when the bike is warmed up and running, it runs fine. It's because it no longer uses that. I don't know how often. I don't know, or if that motor is used the entire time while you're riding around. I don't think it is, and that's probably why you're getting this. Now, my hunch, what I would like to know, like this is why you need two bikes, one to experiment to see what it do. But I'm wondering if you're having a real major problem with it, because again, when you go to start it, if you're trying to do manual throttle on the start, and you're fighting with this IACV valve trying to regulate itself, but it can't do it properly, and the bike won't stay running because it keeps stalling out on you. And you know you'll hold it, and as long as you hold the throttle steady enough at around 2,000 RPM for the first 2 minutes or whatever, it seems to be fine on my bike. But maybe you can't even get yours started. But I wonder if you could, if it's only used for the start, if you could just take it off and just set the throttle by hand. You know what I mean? You just hold the throttle, because you're doing that anyway. So that might be the cheapest fix. It's just you have to keep in mind on a cold startup, you have to know exactly where to place the throttle so that you can start the bike. And have it hold the idle until it's warmed up, and then once it's warmed up, it'll stay running by itself. Then you don't have to worry about it. So I don't know if you can bypass that unit, which would be cool if you could. I tend to like simpler, but I also like things to work perfectly. So I don't know. It's something that when I get a second bike, maybe I'll experiment with it. But I don't know how it works in the circuit, that if you need that thing to be in there all the time, if it works all the time, or if it just works on the startup, the idle air control valve. You guys tell me. Now, if it doesn't, like I say, there might be some solutions that, might be cheaper for guys. Again, if you only have to hold the throttle on till it's warmed up, okay, then you just have to figure out, the starting trick to it of where do you play, like maybe you put like an 8th throttle, and that's enough to keep it idling at 2,000 RPM or whatever without this valve thing hooked up to it. I don't know, you tell me. Experiment with it, but it's just something to look at. I won't go any more detail on it, but that's how, if you look at the mapping of the 10166 map on the Tune ECU, that's what's happening. And my bike seems to be following the sequence right on the money for the temperature, because I watched the temperature a couple of times just to see if my idle was exactly as described, and it seemed to be. So I probably have that program in there, which would make sense. They probably did it, although it doesn't recommend the 10166 program with aftermarket exhaust, but that's probably close enough to stock that it's probably a little bit more free flowing, but it's probably close enough to stock that it can get away with it. Like I said, this bike pulls like a freight train, runs like a charm. If it's a cold day, it runs even better. If it's a hot day, it still runs pretty damn good. Starting above 19 Celsius, because I'm in Canada here, so that's why I use Celsius. So at 19 Celsius, the bike pretty much fires up exactly the way it's supposed to, everything like that. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does, but most of the time it does. So I don't know, maybe I just got like a hairpin crack in there. We'll see what happens in the next couple of days when I pull it apart. So anyway, I know I'm going on very long now, but I thought this was a video that could explain, before you go spend a whole bunch of money or start tampering with the ECU and stuff like that, do the process of elimination. Is it your plugs? Because if I don't find any cracks in there, then the only other thing it could be is plugs. The other thing it could be, and this might, there's a gazillion things it could be. Maybe you have a hairpin leak in your in your head gasket. Maybe you have that. That's a possibility. There's a lot of possibilities here. But process of elimination, if you're having hard starting problems with a Triumph Daytona TT600, first off, before you even bother with the fuel mapping thing, the tune ECU, I would look at your plugs. I'd look at those, again, the idle intake air control valve. There's not a lot of information on it, but you'll figure out. You could look at automotive ones and kind of figure out how they work and stuff like that. It's basically just a plunger. It regulates the amount of air that comes in and the fuel. So how it works in the system, that again. If we share information here, we all can learn a lot. So again, once you get started, does that thing just shut off and that's it? The other thing it could be, it's obviously, if it was your fuel pump, you wouldn't be getting any fuel. There could be clogged filters. There could be all kinds of stuff like that. But I would check those little, because it seems to be that was common, and not on just the TT600s, but Triumphs of that year. It seemed to be those intake air control vacuum tubes. They're basically just looks like a corrugated rubber tube with a little rubber boot on it, and that little rubber boot is what cracks, and once that cracks, it lets in air. So if you got one cracked, the other one's not cracked, the thing can't regulate itself, and that's why you're having starting problems. So I would eliminate those things too. You'll have to remove the tank to do it. When I do it, I'll show you guys. So I'm going on too long now because I want people to actually watch this video, because I do believe it will save you a lot of aggro rather than just rushing it off to the shop at $120 an hour or $60 an hour, whatever a dealership charges. And you can figure it out yourself. It just, especially for older bikes like this, how much money do you want to put into them? So learn these things, and if it's something major, 90% of, I would say 90% of motorcycle failures are electronic. That's why I like carburetors. They might not, but the fuel injection, when it works pretty good. I'm not bashing too much. I mean, when they designed it, I'll just finish on this. When they designed it, I mean, there's probably things that engineers just couldn't account for. Like, for example, how would these things hold up under the extreme heat underneath the tank? You just wouldn't know that, these little plastic bits or whatever, or rubber bits or whatever they are, do they just dry out and crack? You wouldn't know until you put 100,000 miles on it, and, if they made sure that every vehicle that went on the road was 100% reliable, they'd never get a vehicle on the road, right? So that's all vehicles. That's why you end up with recalls. That's why you end up with a first generation, a second generation, a third generation. It's always a tweaking. Okay, well, we got this far with the first generation. It's still a great little bike if you can find them. They seem to hover around an acceptable price, but and if you know what you're looking for, you could probably really do a lot with this little bike. I don't have any major plans to tweak the bike. If I did anything to it, it'd be performance-wise, would be basically gear it down for more bottom-end torque, and just I guess you'd have to remap the speedo so that it would collaborate with your gearing or whatever. I don't know. I'll have to see how that works too, because you know, all electronic stuff like that is always kind of is what it is, right? So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. So hopefully this helps some of you. Sorry for the video being so long, but I thought it was important. There we go. Have yourselves a great day.